Words of wisdom. I love that. Thank you, Robert. So today's talk title, For Wisdom to Arise. So I want to start off with an incident that happened about 10 years ago that I've told before, but it kind of works well with this talk. And it was about my grandson at that time was about 4 years old, and we were in the car together. And he was sitting directly in back of me in his car seat looking forward. And so we were driving along, and he asked me, he said, "Grandma, are you the wisest person in the world?" And I said, "Well, of course, yes, I am." And he said, "Would you know if there was a little boy in the back seat picking his nose?" That was his idea of wisdom, right? If somebody knew everything, you know. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. Is, you know, everybody has their idea about what wisdom is about, and I've kind of collected the ideas of at least about 3 or 4 of them, of the different teachers, you know, through the years that we've had, through the Buddhist teachers and through really the years in ministry and the years of life that I've had. And so I kind of want to speak about that today, about words of wisdom. And what I know and what each of Stacy and Judy read was that we have to clear our minds to really, really get wisdom. We can't think we know everything else. We seem to think that we know it all. And when we are quiet and ready to listen is when we hear. In the Buddhist tradition, wisdom is said to arise within us when we have the ability to see things how they really are, and not as they appear to be. That's an important one. When we are present, when we are mindful, and we don't bring our agenda into the story. We don't have our habitual reactions and our patterns. When our minds are empty, we see things how they really are. And I got to thinking about, you know, for years, thinking of examples of this in my life. And I think about my first marriage and how it appeared to be, right, to everybody else, even to me at times, that everything was just fine. But the real truth was, it wasn't. And what I know is when I got quiet enough, when I really saw deeper and when wisdom arose in me, I got to see the real truth of that. So it's important in our lives, I think, to see things deeper than appearances are. Sometimes we see somebody and we think, wow, they got a lot of money. Not true. Or we see a poor person, you know, and we think they're poor and they're not. We judge things before we really, really have the wisdom to know. There was a story that I read, and there was 2 little lines in it that, boy, showed me what wisdom was. It was about during World War II, there was a woman, and there was a young girl, and the woman says to the little girl, "I'm so sorry that your family has no home." And the 5-year-old little girl said, "Oh, we have a home. We just don't have a house to put it in." I thought, wow, now that was a very wise little girl. No reactive patterns, no stories. We just don't have a house. That's it. You know, wisdom sees things. It sees deeper. It invites us to look at things really deep in our life that aren't working anymore. And then we have to explore how we ourselves can be undermining our own success in life, our own happiness, our own quality of being. I know that for many of us, we always look outside for our quality of life. We look outside, and what wisdom tells us is that our quality of life is an inside job. It isn't determined by other people. It's not even determined by events that go on around us, but how we experience those events. I'm going to Cabo again. I go every year in the last 3 years, and a couple weeks, and that will be a trip. How I experience it will be whether I have a quality trip or not. It's my experience of the trip, right? So we have to look at our life. It's that way in our life. This is a service, right? Just a service. It's all it is. You're the one who gives it meaning. You're the one who gives it your perceptions. You're the one who finds the wisdom or not in this. And I think that's we have to, our experience of the trip, the quality of life is decided by how you experience what is. See, how we think about things, our thoughts. How many times have we talked about our thoughts? With our thoughts, we create our feelings, we create our worlds. And what I know is that wisdom arises when we see beyond me, right? When we see beyond just our little selves and we start to care for other people. One of my favorite wisdom quotes of all time was Einstein. And he taught that each man is part of an entity that we call the universe. This is part of his quote. He said that we experience our thoughts, our perceptions, our feelings, as though there's something separate from everyone else. He called it some kind of optical delusion that we live in. He says it's an optical illusion of consciousness. And he says that we live in a state of delusion, and because of that, we imprison ourselves. And that restricts us from seeing beyond our own wants and our own desires, and from caring about other people, about caring from anybody that's not close to us. And I thought about that. Boy, the way that we free ourselves is to start to care, start to move out from beyond caring about just the me, looking at our own ego, looking about what's I want, but going beyond that. You know, and I'm thinking about what's going on in the world today. You know, why care about climate change, right? It's not going to affect us. We'll be gone. Maybe it will. You know, we have to think about that, you know, and go beyond ourselves and look about the generations that come after us. See, it's not just then about my world anymore. It's about this world. We're connected. It matters. It matters. To break the prison of selfishness, he said, we have to care. We have to care. Buddha said that nothing exists by itself, that everything works in relation to everything else. Everything is interdependent. And what he was saying is, we have to get out of ourselves. We have to know that we're connected with nature, with each other, with other matter. We are connected. So wisdom arises when we expand ourselves. When we expand, there's a teaching in Buddhism that's called expand your container. And I've always loved that because I thought, wow, that just makes us bigger than our problems are. See, we become bigger than the problem that you have at hand. You shine a floodlight on the problem instead of a little spotlight on my problem, my problem, my problem. When you get out of yourself and your own stuff, you'll see the world expands and your problems shrink. When our light shines bigger than your problems. That's a correct perspective. That's a bigger and open perspective. There's a proverb that says, instead of complaining that the rose bush is full of thorns, be happy, the thorn bush has roses. I love that. I love that. Wisdom also arises when we get to choose what we're paying attention to. Now think about this in your life. Wisdom arises when you choose what you're going to pay attention to. Have you ever suddenly stopped yourself after realizing that you've been dwelling over these insignificant things that go on in your head over and over and over, and you go, why am I thinking this? Why am I thinking this over and over and over? Maybe it was something that didn't go right in the day, or something that happened, or somebody said something to you that irritated you. Whatever it wasn't a big deal, but your head just keeps mentally rehashing it over and over and over. What I know is that when I do that, every time that happens to me, I give power away. I give power to the little things that seem to bother me instead of choosing to feel the peace and the quality of life that is right there in front of us. See, thinking just isn't an activity. It manifests your state of being. Wow, I mean, we've talked about thinking and thoughts before. I think it was 60 to 85,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of them are the same thoughts. The same thoughts over and over and over. That is creating your reality, your life. That same problem I have over and over, I'm thinking about it all day long. Instead of getting out beyond myself and deserving the quality of life that is there. As the Buddha said, what we think we become. See, The truth is that wisdom has arisen in each one of you when you notice life, when you notice what's going on around you, and you're filled with love, and you're filled with gratitude, and you're filled with the pure gift of just being alive, when you know that that's a gift. When each moment becomes such a beautiful moment of being alive, you know that wisdom has risen in you. When someone smiles, it becomes a gift. When you see a flock of geese, or a orange sunset, or a baby laughing, what is it for you? A dog playing, licking your face? You would hate that, though, the face. I know you. Dog playing, I love that, you know. Wisdom has arisen. And when stuff happens in your life and you see yourself responding instead of reacting and coming from those habitual patterns that we have, then you know that there's wisdom inside of you and you're feeling it. When you choose love instead of fear, you choose wisdom. When we have surrendered all of our blame, our shame, our meanness, our prejudices, our negative attitudes, we surrender the idea that everything revolves around us, that I'm a victim. Wisdom arises when we love, when we go deep. Hafiz was a 14th century poet, mystic, around the time of Rumi. I love him. When he was asked, what are some of the signs of someone who knows wisdom? He says, they have dropped the cruel knife they so often use upon themselves and others. See, I love that. Wisdom arises when we drop our knives against each other and against ourselves, right? What I know is that when we can cry for this world and still have the courage to change it, that's wisdom, or at least try to change it. That's what wisdom is. Having the courage to try. So I'm going to close with a quote by Kahlil Gibran. And what he says is, wisdom ceases to be wisdom when it becomes too proud to weep, too grave to laugh, and too selfish to seek other than itself. You're all very wise beings. Thank you.